Well, we get a chance to be together, and as I wanted to say earlier, that this is a tough talk to follow, but I'm going to step in and talk about my women in transition coaching, and mainly I'm going to start out by talking about me and how I got to this place. I went through some very challenging transitions about 20 some years ago, but where I'd like to start is when I was 10 years old, I had some challenges in childhood, but I had two desires and two dreams. I wanted to go to France. I wanted to move to Florida. When I was 18, I got to go to France. When I was in my 20s, I got to move to Florida. And that was great. I loved it. But then I had to turn around and move back. I was out of work for about a year, didn't know what I know now, so I couldn't find something that I could support myself on. So after about a year, I had to move back home, move back in with my parents, move back to an area that I didn't really want to live in. And to top it off, I ended up in a job I didn't want to be in either. But that was the best I could come up with at the time. And then about 3 years after that, I ended up in a situation where I was working in pharmacy retail, and I ended up in a store. It was a really challenging winter that year. The snow kept freezing and thawing. These old flat roofs, and lo and behold, the roof caved in where I was working. So fortunately, nobody was injured, but I ended up working third shift. So here I am, back in a community I don't want to be in, back in a job, the kind of job I don't want to be in, and then having to work the night shift, the graveyard shift. So that was pretty challenging for me, and it was pretty painful. I got pretty discouraged at times, but I was fortunate before I moved back here. I had started studying some spiritual teachings. So I really was starting to search and to try to find answers even at that point. And then about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which was extremely challenging. I probably had it for about 5 years before I knew I had it. And that was really kind of the low point for me, and when I really started to dig in and searching, because when I first was diagnosed, I cried. I thought, I can't handle this for the rest of my life, because that was my expectation. I went to the traditional medical system. Now, what I know, I wouldn't have done that. I would have sought out some alternatives instead of that. But anyway, that was really the thing that really started to get me moving. It was really a wake-up call for me, because I realized that, part of the symptoms of diabetes, apparently, you can end up being really irritable and cranky. Well, I was pretty irritable and cranky, but I'm sure it wasn't all that. I'm sure part of it was the job situation that I was in that I really didn't like, and I had this really challenging manager who could just get really nasty and ugly about stuff and just kind of blew things out of proportion. Well, anyway, I started to keep searching and looking to find a way out of there, and fortunately I did. I found a way out of there by discovering various online resources. I discovered things like EFT, which Pamela Bruner already talked about. I discovered other kinds of things. I discovered that there were coaches out there that could help me. I, just made use of whatever internet resources I could find. And then I came across a virtual coaching training program, and I thought, wow, this looks like for me, because a number of years ago, I was a clinical social worker, but I got burned out, and so I had to move on and find something else. So I thought, wow, this is a chance to get back in, to do something to really help people, because that was my frustration at my job, they were so concerned about getting people in and out of there really quickly, which I can kind of understand. We're living in a really hectic time, and our lives are really hectic and all that, but it wasn't very satisfying for me, because I didn't feel like I was really doing anything worthwhile to really help people. So anyway, the reason that I have gotten into coaching, and particularly women in transition coaching, is because I've been through a number of transitions, including the ones that I just talked about, and I can appreciate that it's really scary and challenging when you're going through life changes and you're not sure what your next steps are, and you have to hunt and search for things. So I really want to make it easier for other women to find the answers that they're looking for. And one of the things I've discovered is that there really are stages of a transition. And the first stage is contemplation, where you're either in a situation that's really challenging for you and just really difficult, and you're not sure what to do. It's like when I moved back here, I was like, man, I don't really want to be back here. And so I started searching for tools and ideas and was trying to contemplate what I was going to do. And I knew I needed to get some kind of job or do some kind of work to generate some income. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my life living in my parents' home if I could help it, though I did unfortunately end up there for 11 years. And one thing I forgot to mention is along the way, after I moved back, about 9 months after I moved back, my dad passed away. So that was pretty challenging for my mom. That's part of the reason that I stayed there. But it really wasn't a good situation ultimately for either one of us. I think it was maybe too long that we did that. But anyway, I discovered that you really have to contemplate, you really have to look at where you're at, you have to know where you're at, accept where you're at, which I had a little trouble with, but I've gotten better at that. And then you have to start looking around for where your answers are. You can't just accept forever. I mean, you can accept you're in the moment and you can accept what's happening for you in the moment, but you have to start finding some steps to move out of that. And that's what I kind of learned from the challenges that I went through. Certainly, when I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, I got so I could accept it, but I was only going to accept it to a point. I was not going to accept, first of all, I was not going to let people call me a diabetic. That was not part of my identity. I was not going to accept the things that they recommended that you go to these 3-day classes to learn how to manage your diabetes. And when they started getting into things like, well, we're just going to keep putting you on pills and then you're going to end up on insulin, I'm sitting there thinking, no way. No way is that going to happen to me. And they started doing the scary stuff about the amputations and the side effects, the eventual processes that could happen to you. So I decided, So I found, at that point, I started looking for natural alternatives. I started looking for another way out of that. And that is my goal. My eventual goal is to reverse my diabetes. But anyway, the middle stage is when you're right smack dab in the middle of it and you're experiencing it and you're experiencing all the emotions, and it can be very upsetting and very volatile in terms of the ups and downs that you can feel when you're going through a transition. It could be an illness transition like mine. It could be something like a divorce. It could be something, even it could be a good kind of thing, because even those are kind of challenging too, like having a new baby or getting married. Those are big changes. And there can certainly be some challenges that come along with those. And then the final stage that we go through is what I call the aftermath, because a lot of times we just want to get through those changes as fast as we can. We don't want to try to grow through them, which is the whole idea of me starting Women in Transition coaching. That kind of coaching is because it's such an opportunity when you're going through a transition. It may be very emotionally painful. You may not be sure what to do, but you're going to learn some things. And if you're open to learning those things, then you're going to grow through that transition. You're going to discover things about yourself that you didn't know you had. You're going to discover an amazing depth of courage. You're going to be amazing depth of willingness. You're going to be maybe much more decisive than you've ever been in your life. Say you were in a divorce and maybe your husband made a lot of the decisions. You're going to find out that you can make decisions that you didn't think you could make, that you can maybe manage the money if you weren't doing that before. So I call it aftermath because of the fact that we go through it and maybe don't look for those opportunities. And this is what I want to point out to all of you, is that the value in discovering those opportunities. That's where the gifts are, is where you may uncover skills and abilities that you didn't know that you had. You may have some gifts and talents that you kind of just shoved under the rug because maybe you were married and you had kids and you didn't have time to do those kind of activities anymore. Well, now's your chance not only to pursue those things, but also for you to maybe generate some income with those, which would be pretty amazing. So what I'd like to go ahead and do is I'd like to go ahead and move into talking about the process I take women through to to get to the point where they're appreciating those gifts. The first point I already touched upon, which is acceptance. And, you know, it's kind of like Eckhart Tolle talks about, you have to be in the present moment. If you accept what's happened, if you accept the feelings that you're having while you're going through this process, then it's going to be amazing that emotional energy is going to dissipate because you decided that you were going to, and acceptance, I want to make it real clear, acceptance does not mean you resign yourself to the situation. Doesn't mean you beat yourself up over the head for where you've gotten yourself, even though that we know we all have responsibility for our thoughts and our feelings. We have to kind of be loving, kind, and gentle with ourselves, particularly at the beginning, especially if it's a transition we didn't expect. Like somebody serves us with divorce papers. We had no clue that was coming. We didn't see it coming. Though actually there were signs, we just weren't, quite honestly, we weren't paying attention. But it's easy for that to happen. It's important not to beat yourself up over for that. So the next thing that you need to do is you need to start looking at what it is you really want. Because here's an opportunity now. You have an opportunity to make some new choices. You have some freedom that maybe you didn't have before to make choices, how you want to spend your time, who you want to spend your time with, what kind of activities you want to be doing, and how that's going to lead you if you need to generate income, if all of a sudden you're, say, like a single mother, single parent, you know, or just maybe a displaced homemaker, you know, all of a sudden you're it, and you've got to find a way to support yourself. It's an amazing opportunity because you can decide to do whatever it is you really want to do. There's got to be a way for that to happen. If you have a desire for it to happen, there's got to be a way to show up for it. And then what comes after that is we, you know, if, say I was working with you one-on-one, we would look at what might be getting in the way and what kind of goals you want to start setting around that. So probably the goals first, and then looking at the blocks that are getting in the way of that. And then what I'd help you do is, and I want you guys to maybe think about this in your own life, is are there any patterns? Have you ever noticed any patterns of behavior? Do you find yourself repeating certain kinds of experiences over and over again? Like in dating relationships. I know that was one transition I didn't talk about with me, but that was very challenging moving from in and out of relationships because I seemed to attract the same kind of guy that either he was a budding alcoholic, there were a couple of them that were gay and didn't tell me. And obviously we found that out. And, you know, so it was very challenging situations. So I decided, well, you know, that was definitely a wake-up call because I thought, wow, I got to really look at that before I even go into relationships again. Because I remember as a clinical social worker how that happened in people that I worked with. I would see that, and especially the young women, jump right in from one relationship to the next. Then what we would go ahead and do is we would focus on, like we were talking about goals, we would focus on the action steps. And before that, we would want to be sure that we focused on what you thought was going to get in the way of that and to see what we could do to help you remove that block, to see what, you know, maybe you need some more support. Maybe just identifying what's getting in the way is enough to get you to, you know, kind of gently push yourself forward. Even if it seems scary, even if maybe it didn't work out so well the last time you tried it, but at least there's nothing like having the support there, you know, the support of a coach, for instance, to help you move forward in that. And then in setting those goals, one of the things I think is really important about doing that is that not to set them too big, to make sure that stretch yourself enough by setting a goal, so don't set them too low, but just enough so that you don't feel overwhelmed. And sometimes what you need to do is break those goals down into smaller baby steps, smaller manageable steps, so that you can really see that sense of accomplishment. You know you've achieved something, and then you just move right on and to the next action step, to that next small goal. And then basically, finally, the end result of that is you want to be held accountable. Somebody needs to hold you accountable. If you don't have a coach, maybe it can be a friend, maybe it can be a family member, but it's really important to have somebody hold you accountable so that you, because otherwise, I mean, we can set goals. I mean, look at New Year's New Year's resolutions. How many of you have made New Year's resolutions and 30 days to 60 days after you've made them, you didn't follow through? Yeah. So that's a big piece there, and really important to make sure that you have that accountability. So my hope is for you that if you know any women out there that are going through transitions, that you make information available to them. If you're going through any transitions, or even if you've gone through some transitions and maybe they were pretty rocky, what I would highly recommend that you do is take maybe 15 or 30 minutes and take a piece of paper and a pen and write down everything that you can remember that you've been through, and go back and look at those. And are you really at peace with them? Have you learned something from those transitions? And what was it that you learned? And if you haven't learned those things, maybe it's time to go through a process like this where you could do something like you could journal, keep a journal every day. And you could also journal about take each one of these experiences, not necessarily all at once, but if you wanted to take a couple hours to do it, that would be fine. But see if you can start to identify what you learned from those experiences. Did you become stronger? Did you discover a talent that you didn't know that you had? Did you find that you became more courageous and that you were more willing to do things like take a calculated risk? A calculated risk means that you kind of planned as best that you know how, but it's still going to stretch you some. It's still going to make you move forward, and maybe it's going to surprise you that you're going to learn that you're more capable than you thought you were, that you were more, abilities that you didn't know that you had. Maybe you could accomplish something that you never thought you could accomplish, whether it's running a marathon, whether it's something really physical, whether it's learning a hobby, or maybe taking that hobby and taking the hobby or activity that you're passionate about and putting it out there and charging money for it, and actually charging the money that it really has the value of. So anyway, I hope that what I've had to say has been helpful for you, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. So I want to thank you very much. Thank you.